The rain fell in gentle sheets over Manhattan's West Village, washing the cobblestone streets with a glossy sheen that reflected the warm glow of streetlights and restaurant windows. It was the kind of autumn evening that made New Yorkers grateful for warmth and shelter, a sentiment not lost on Michael Chen as he hurried toward Stella Nova, the upscale Italian restaurant he'd quietly invested in 5 years ago. Michael pulled his worn leather jacket closer as he walked, his dark hair dampened by the rain. Despite being worth millions, he preferred blending in with the city's anonymous masses. No driver, no entourage, just a man in jeans and boots making his way through the rain. Few would recognize him as the Hollywood star Keanu Reeves on such a night, and that was exactly how he liked it. He hadn't visited Stella Nova in nearly 2 months. Between filming schedules and other commitments, Michael had been relying on his business partner Anthony's reports about the restaurant's operations. But there was something about being physically present, about experiencing the atmosphere as a patron rather than an owner, that gave Michael insights no financial statement could provide. As he approached the restaurant's elegant facade, warm light spilled onto the sidewalk from tall windows framed by deep burgundy awnings. The restaurant's name, Stella Nova, glowed in understated gold lettering above the entrance. Through the rain-streaked glass, Michael could see the dining room was busy, tables filled with well-dressed patrons enjoying what appeared to be another successful evening. Michael was about to push open the door when movement at the edge of the building caught his attention. In the narrow alley beside the restaurant, a figure was backing away from the service entrance, hands raised in a placating gesture. Even in the dim light, Michael could see the man's weathered face and disheveled appearance, an elderly gentleman wearing layers of mismatched clothing, all bearing the unmistakable signs of life on the streets. "I'm not causing trouble," the man was saying, his voice carrying a dignity that contrasted with his appearance. "Just asking if there's any food going to waste. I can wait until closing." The restaurant employee standing in the doorway, a young man in the black shirt and tie that constituted Stella Nova's staff uniform, shook his head firmly. "I told you, we don't do that here. This is a 5-star establishment, not a soup kitchen. You need to leave before I call security." Something in the exchange made Michael pause. It wasn't just the rejection. He understood that restaurants had protocols and policies, but rather the tone, the dismissive wave of the hand, as if the homeless man were nothing more than an inconvenience to be cleared away before anyone important noticed. The older man nodded, shoulders slumping slightly as he turned to shuffle back toward the street. His face, lined with age and hardship, showed no anger, only resignation, as if this rejection were merely one in a long series of similar experiences. Michael found himself stepping away from the main entrance, following an instinct that pulled him toward the alley instead. As he approached, the restaurant employee was already closing the service door, his job of removing the unwanted visitor apparently complete. "Excuse me," Michael called, his voice gentle but carrying clearly through the pattering rain. Both men turned. The homeless man paused in his retreat, while the employee's expression shifted from annoyance to surprise as he registered Michael's presence. "Sir," the employee said, straightening his posture, "the main entrance is around front." Michael nodded, but his attention was on the elderly man, who was looking at him with curious, intelligent eyes. "I couldn't help overhearing," Michael said. "What's your name, sir?" The homeless man seemed taken aback by the question, as if being addressed as sir was more surprising than being acknowledged at all. "William," he replied after a moment. "William Hayes." "Mr. Hayes," Michael said with a respectful nod. "I'm Michael. Are you hungry?" William's eyes darted between Michael and the restaurant employee, who was now watching the exchange with growing discomfort. "I don't want charity," William said finally. "Just thought I'd ask about leftovers. Some places set aside what they can't sell." "And some places should," Michael agreed, feeling the weight of the restaurant employee's stare. He turned to face the young man, whose name tag identified him as Jason. "Is the kitchen still serving?" Jason's expression had morphed from dismissive to uncertain. Something about Michael's calm confidence suggested authority, though Jason couldn't quite place why. "Yes, sir, for another 2 hours." "Good," Michael said, turning back to William. "Would you join me for dinner, Mr. Hayes? I'd appreciate the company." William's weathered face registered surprise, then suspicion. "Why would you want to eat with me?" "Because I'm hungry. You're hungry, and conversations with strangers are often the most interesting kind," Michael replied simply. He gestured toward the main entrance. "Shall we?" Jason stepped forward, clearly alarmed. "Sir, I'm not sure if what?" Michael asked, his voice still gentle, but carrying an unmistakable note of challenge. "It's just that we have a dress code and certain standards for our patrons," Jason explained, his discomfort evident. Michael nodded thoughtfully. "I understand. Standards are important." He glanced down at his own rain-dampened jeans and boots. "I'm afraid I'm not exactly dressed for fine dining myself tonight." Jason quickly backpedaled. "No, sir, you're fine, of course. I just meant—" "You meant him," Michael finished, nodding toward William. "Tell me, does your policy specifically exclude people based on their current financial circumstances, or is it truly about appropriate attire?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications that made Jason shift uncomfortably. "It's about maintaining an atmosphere, sir." "I see," Michael said. "And who determines what kind of person contributes positively to that atmosphere?" Before Jason could respond, Michael removed his leather jacket and offered it to William. "Would this help meet the standard?" he asked, though the question wasn't really directed at William. The homeless man hesitated, then accepted the jacket with careful hands. "This is a very nice coat." "It's just a coat," Michael replied with a small smile, "and we're just two people about to have dinner." Jason glanced nervously toward the main restaurant, clearly torn between enforcing what he perceived as policy and the growing sense that the soft-spoken stranger before him wasn't someone to be dismissed. "Let me check with the manager," he said finally. "That would be Anthony Rossi?" Michael asked. Jason blinked in surprise. "Yes, sir. Do you know him?" "We're acquainted," Michael said with a slight smile. "Please let him know Michael Chen is here with a guest." As Jason hurried toward the main entrance, William looked at Michael with newfound curiosity. "You some kind of big shot?" Michael chuckled softly. "No, just someone who believes people deserve dignity regardless of their circumstances." William nodded slowly, pulling Michael's jacket around his shoulders. It was too large for his thin frame, but it lent him an air of distinguished casualness that transformed his appearance in subtle ways. "Been a while since anyone looked me in the eye," he admitted. "Longer still since anyone invited me to dinner." "Then we're overdue to correct that," Michael replied, gesturing toward the front of the restaurant. "Shall we?" The two men walked together around the building to the main entrance, where Jason was already returning with a tall, impeccably dressed Italian man whose expression had transformed from concern to delight. "Michael," Anthony exclaimed, embracing him warmly. "Why didn't you call ahead? We would have prepared something special." "Spontaneity has its charms," Michael replied, returning the embrace before stepping back. "Anthony, this is my friend William Hayes. William, this is Anthony Rossi, the heart and soul of Stella Nova." Anthony barely missed a beat, extending his hand to William with the same warmth he'd shown Michael. "Any friend of Michael's is welcome here, Mr. Hayes. Please, follow me to our best table." The look on Jason's face as they passed him at the door was a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Behind them, Michael heard Anthony murmur something to the young man, whose "Yes, sir" response carried the unmistakable tone of someone who'd just received a firm but necessary correction. The interior of Stella Nova was exactly as Michael had envisioned when he and Anthony had planned it years ago, elegant without being pretentious, warm without being casual. Rich mahogany panels lined the walls, complemented by soft amber lighting that cast a gentle glow over tables draped in crisp white linens. A central fireplace provided both warmth and a natural focal point around which the dining area was arranged. As Anthony led them through the restaurant, Michael noticed the subtle glances from other diners, not recognition of him as a celebrity, but rather curiosity about William, whose appearance, despite Michael's jacket, clearly marked him as unusual in such surroundings. They were seated at a corner table near the fireplace, partially secluded by an arrangement of potted olive trees that offered privacy without isolation. A waitress appeared almost immediately with water and menus, her professional demeanor betraying no reaction to William's presence. "Our chef has prepared a special risotto with wild mushrooms this evening," Anthony informed them. "And the branzino is exceptional. I'll send your usual wine, Michael." Michael nodded. "Thank you, Anthony, and perhaps some tea for Mr. Hayes?" "Actually," William interjected with quiet dignity, "I haven't had a good glass of red wine in years, if it's not too much trouble." Anthony smiled. "Of course, I'll bring 2 glasses." As Anthony departed, William looked around the restaurant with appreciative eyes. "Beautiful place," he commented. "Reminds me of a restaurant in Florence I visited, long time ago, different life." Michael leaned forward, genuinely interested. "You've been to Florence? I wasn't always." William gestured vaguely at himself. This, war veteran, then teacher for 30 years, classics and literature at Hudson High School. A shadow passed over his face. "Medical bills for my wife ate through our savings. After she passed, I couldn't keep up with the mortgage. One thing led to another." The simple explanation contained volumes, a life of service, love, loss, and the precarious financial balance that so many lived within. Michael nodded, recognizing both the tragedy and the dignity in William's abbreviated story. "What did you teach?" Michael asked as the waitress returned with a bottle of Barolo and 2 glasses. William's eyes lit up at the question. "Primarily ancient Greek and Roman literature, the Iliad, the Odyssey, Virgil, Ovid." He watched with appreciation as the waitress poured the wine. "I always started the semester with a question. What makes a hero? Is it strength, cunning, wealth, or something else entirely?" Michael raised his glass in a subtle toast. "And what was your answer?" William considered the question as he took a small sip of wine, closing his eyes briefly to savor the taste. "Compassion," he said finally. "Heroes are remembered not for what they possess, but for how they treat others, especially those who can offer nothing in return." The conversation flowed naturally as they ordered their meals, William choosing the risotto while Michael opted for the branzino. Throughout the restaurant, Michael noticed other patrons stealing occasional glances their way, curiosity evident in their expressions. At a nearby table, a well-dressed couple was engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion with Jason, who had apparently been assigned to their section. Though Michael couldn't hear their words, the woman's gestures toward William made her complaints clear enough. William noticed too, his shoulders tensing slightly. "Perhaps this wasn't a good idea," he murmured. "I'm causing problems for you." "You're not causing anything," Michael replied calmly. "Their reaction is their responsibility, not yours." The woman at the nearby table raised her voice enough that her words carried to them. "This is unacceptable. We're paying premium prices for a certain atmosphere, not to dine next to someone off the street." Michael saw Jason's discomfort as he attempted to placate the woman while glancing nervously toward William and Michael. Before the situation could escalate, Anthony appeared at the couple's table, his posture both professional and firm. Though Michael couldn't hear Anthony's response, the effect was immediate. The couple's expressions shifted from indignation to embarrassment. A moment later, Anthony was escorting them toward another table across the restaurant, his hand gestures suggesting both apology and finality. When their meals arrived, William regarded his risotto with reverence. "It's been years since I've had a proper meal in a restaurant," he admitted. "I almost don't know how to act." "Act like yourself," Michael suggested. "That's all any of us can do." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the simple pleasure of good food creating a bridge between their vastly different worlds. Michael found himself watching William, the careful way he savored each bite, the slight straightening of his posture as the evening progressed, the gradual return of confidence that came with being treated as a human being worthy of dignity. "May I ask what you do, Michael?" William inquired after a while. "Besides rescuing old men from the rain." Michael smiled. "I work in film, various projects." "An artist, then?" William nodded approvingly. "Any films I might know?" "Perhaps," Michael replied with a modest shrug, "but I'd rather hear more about your teaching. 30 years of inspiring young minds, that's a legacy worth discussing." William's eyes brightened at the opportunity to speak about his former profession. He shared stories of particularly challenging students who later became successes, of creative approaches to making ancient texts relevant to modern teenagers, of the pride he felt watching generations of students discover the timeless wisdom in thousand-year-old words. The ancient Greeks understood something we often forget, William explained, his voice taking on the measured cadence of a seasoned educator. They knew that how we treat the most vulnerable among us defines who we are as a society. Hospitality was sacred. Even the poorest home would offer shelter and food to strangers, because the beggar at your door might be a god in disguise testing your humanity. Anthony returned to their table as they were finishing their meal. "Everything to your satisfaction, gentlemen?" "Exceptional, as always," Michael confirmed. "The best meal I've had in years," William added with genuine gratitude. "Compliments to your chef." Anthony beamed. "I'll pass that along. He'll be pleased." He hesitated slightly before continuing. "Michael, when you have a moment, there's something I'd like to discuss regarding the new menu concepts." Michael nodded, understanding that Anthony was discreetly asking to speak with him privately. "Of course. William, would you excuse me for just a moment?" William gestured graciously. "Take your time. I'm quite content here." Michael followed Anthony to a small office tucked behind the bar area. Once the door closed behind them, Anthony's professional demeanor gave way to concern. "Michael, I need to apologize for how William was treated," he said immediately. "Jason is new and clearly misunderstood our policies. I've already had a word with him." Michael shook his head. "It's not just Jason. It's a mentality that pervades too many establishments, this idea that worth is determined by appearance or financial status." Anthony nodded soberly. "You're right, of course, but I want you to know this isn't what we stand for. Not what you stand for, certainly not what I stand for." "I know that," Michael assured him, "which is why I'd like to propose something." He outlined a simple plan, a policy that would formalize what many restaurants did informally, setting aside quality food that would otherwise go to waste for those in need. "We could call it the Stella Nova Community Table," Michael suggested. One table, reserved during the last hour of service each night, where anyone can come and eat with dignity, not leftovers in the alley, but a proper meal in a proper setting. Anthony considered the idea, nodding slowly. It would need to be managed carefully, but... His expression brightened. "Yes, I think we could make this work. It aligns perfectly with what we've always wanted this place to represent." By the time they returned to the table, William was engaged in conversation with their waitress, who was laughing at something he had said. The transformation was remarkable, from the hunched figure in the alley to this animated storyteller who had captivated a young woman half a century his junior with what appeared to be an amusing anecdote about ancient Rome. "Everything all right?" William asked as Michael resumed his seat. "Better than all right," Michael replied with a smile. "Anthony and I were just discussing a new initiative for the restaurant. In fact, we could use your expertise, if you're willing." William raised an eyebrow, curiosity evident in his expression. "My expertise? I'm afraid my culinary skills are limited to opening cans these days." "Not culinary expertise," Michael clarified. "Your understanding of literature, education, and dignity. We're establishing a community table here at Stella Nova, and we need someone who understands both the classics and the realities of life on the streets to help shape the program." William's expression shifted from curiosity to cautious hope. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A consultant position to start," Michael explained. "Help us establish protocols, train staff, ensure the program maintains the dignity of all involved. If it works out, perhaps something more permanent." For a moment, William seemed at a loss for words, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the table as if to steady himself against an unexpected wave of emotion. "Why would you do this?" he asked finally. "You don't know me." "I know enough," Michael replied simply. "I know you've dedicated your life to education, that you maintain your dignity despite difficult circumstances, and that you can quote Homer over risotto. Most importantly, I know that worth isn't determined by current circumstances, but by character." The restaurant had grown quieter as the evening progressed, many of the earlier diners having departed. In the relative stillness, the sound of the front door opening drew Michael's attention. A young woman entered, early 20s, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her expression a mixture of determination and exhaustion as she scanned the dining room. William followed Michael's gaze, his face lighting up with recognition. "Emily," he murmured, raising a hand to catch her attention. The young woman spotted them, relief washing over her features as she hurried toward their table. "Grandpa!" she exclaimed. "I've been looking everywhere for you. When you weren't at the shelter, I got worried." "Emily, my dear," William said, standing to embrace her. "I'm sorry to have concerned you. I've been having dinner with my new friend, Michael Chen." Emily turned to Michael, extending her hand. "Thank you for looking after him. He refuses to come live with me because he doesn't want to be a burden, but he doesn't seem to understand how worried I get." "It was my pleasure," Michael assured her, shaking her hand. "Your grandfather is excellent company. In fact, we've been discussing a potential consulting opportunity for him here at Stella Nova." Emily's expression shifted from gratitude to confusion. "Here, at this restaurant?" "Emily works 3 jobs to pay for nursing school," William explained to Michael, pride evident in his voice. "She's brilliant, but stubborn about accepting help. A family trait, I'm afraid." "Grandpa has a PhD in classical literature," Emily told Michael, a protective note entering her voice. "He taught for 30 years before things got difficult." "So he mentioned," Michael replied with a warm smile, "which is precisely why his insight would be valuable to us. Anthony, the manager, and I were just discussing a new community initiative, and your grandfather's background in both education and, unfortunately, experiencing homelessness firsthand gives him a unique perspective we need." Emily studied Michael with cautious hope. "This is a real offer? Not charity?" "Dignity isn't charity," Michael replied. "It's recognizing worth regardless of circumstance." The 3 of them talked for another half-hour, outlining the preliminary details of William's role and addressing Emily's concerns. By the time they finished, the restaurant had nearly emptied, with only a few lingering patrons and staff preparing for closing. As they prepared to leave, Anthony approached with a small package. "Some tiramisu and cannoli for later," he explained, handing it to William. "And this." He extended a business card. "My direct number. We'll start the program next week, if that works for you." William accepted both the package and the card with evident emotion. "Thank you. For everything." As they walked toward the exit, Jason approached, his earlier confidence replaced by genuine contrition. "Sir," he began, addressing William directly, "I wanted to apologize for my behavior earlier. It was unprofessional and unkind." William regarded the young man thoughtfully before nodding. The ancient Greeks had a concept called anagnorisis, the moment of recognition when a character realizes a truth that changes everything. It appears we've both experienced that tonight. He extended his hand. "I accept your apology, young man." Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. As they stood on the sidewalk, Emily turned to Michael with a curious expression. "I feel like I should know who you are," she admitted. "There's something familiar about you." Before Michael could respond, a passing couple slowed, the man doing a double take before approaching. "Excuse me," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. "Are you Keanu Reeves?" Michael smiled politely. "I am." The man's face lit up. "I'm a huge fan. Would it be possible to get a quick photo?" "Of course," Michael replied, posing briefly with the delighted couple before they continued on their way, the woman whispering excitedly to her companion. Emily stared at Michael, her eyes wide with sudden recognition. You're Keanu Reeves, the Keanu Reeves." "Just a person," Michael corrected gently. "Like your grandfather. Like you." William chuckled softly. "Well, that explains a few things. Though I must admit, I'm more familiar with your work in Much Ado About Nothing than some of your more recent films." Michael laughed, genuinely delighted by William's response. A man of taste, clearly. "I can't believe Keanu Reeves just offered my grandfather a job," Emily murmured, still processing the revelation. "Michael Chen offered your grandfather a job," Michael corrected, "because he's exactly the right person for it. The name and face are incidental." As they prepared to part ways, Emily having assured Michael that they had a place to stay for the night, and that she would bring her grandfather to the restaurant next week to begin his consulting work, William handed Michael back his leather jacket. "Keep it," Michael insisted. "It looks better on you anyway." William shook his head. "Thank you. But no, you've already given me something far more valuable than a coat. He straightened to his full height, the dignity that had been momentarily diminished in the alley now fully restored. You've reminded me that a man's worth isn't determined by his circumstances, but by how he responds to them, and by how he treats others. Michael accepted the jacket with a nod of understanding. The hero's true nature revealed not by strength or wealth, but by compassion. Precisely, William agreed with a teacher's approval. Though I believe it was you who demonstrated that lesson tonight, not I. After they had said their goodbyes and Emily had led her grandfather toward the subway, Michael stood for a moment outside Stella Nova, the restaurant's warm glow illuminating the now empty sidewalk. Through the windows, he could see the staff preparing for the next day, straightening chairs, folding napkins, transforming the space from the evening's end to a new beginning. Anthony emerged from the front door, locking it behind him. Not your typical impromptu visit, he observed with a small smile. No, Michael agreed, but perhaps one of the more important ones. The community table program starts Monday, Anthony confirmed. William will be here at 4 p.m. to help train the staff. I've already adjusted the schedules. He hesitated before adding, You know, most people in your position would have just written a check to a homeless shelter and considered their good deed done. Michael considered this. A check helps, certainly, but recognition of someone's humanity helps more. He glanced down the street where William and Emily had disappeared into the night. Sometimes people don't need our resources as much as they need our respect. Later that night, as Michael returned to his hotel, he reflected on the evening's events. What had begun as a simple visit to check on his investment had transformed into something entirely different, a reminder of why he had wanted to create Stella Nova in the first place. Not just as a restaurant that served exceptional food, but as a place that honored the fundamental dignity of everyone who entered its doors. In a city of millions, where it was all too easy to become invisible, whether due to fame that made people see only an image, or hardship that made people look away entirely, genuine connection remained the rarest and most precious commodity of all. Tonight, in the simple act of sharing a meal and recognizing another's worth, Michael had found something that neither wealth nor fame could provide: the satisfaction of seeing someone else's dignity restored. As he drifted toward sleep, Michael remembered something William had said over dinner, a quote the teacher had attributed to Aristotle: "The essence of life is to serve others and do good." Tonight, at least, he felt he had lived up to that ideal, not as Keanu Reeves, the actor, but simply as Michael Chen, a human being who had recognized another's humanity. And in a world that too often measured worth by wealth, fame, or status, that recognition was perhaps the most valuable currency of all.